Indeed, fighting against the terrorist group has spread back into the north of Gaza recently, and the Americans, for one, are not convinced. The National Security Advisor in the US, Jake Sullivan, said this week that military pressure is necessary but not sufficient to fully defeat Hamas, and the State Department added that Israel has a responsibility to connect their military operation to a truly clear strategic endgame. From Vietnam on, there is, of course, a long tradition of big conventional military forces being unable to hold down enemies using guerrilla tactics. I think it's time to talk more about Hamas as a fighting organisation, and joining me to do that now is Paola Caridi, an Italian journalist and author of Hamas, From Resistance to Regime. Paola, very good to see you there. Are you surprised by the apparent ability of Hamas to hang on militarily and keep fighting for so long against a much more heavily armed Israeli force?
But I think it depends on the transformation from of the armed wing, the Ezzedine al-Qassam brigades, to a military wing. So there was a sort of militarization of the al-Qassam brigades along the last 17 years. From the moment Gaza was sealed by the Israeli army up to now.
And from that moment, we know that Hamas were preparing their underground network of tunnels and their bunkers and their stockpiles and so on. Do you think they have been preparing for this war for 15, 16, 17 years?
I don't know, but I don't think so. I think that we are focusing, of course, on the military aspect, but we have also to focus on the political wing and the fact that Hamas was and is also a political organization that transformed also the Palestinian political arena in the last 40 years. And this is the reason why it's so impossible to defeat Hamas, in the sense that Hamas is not Gaza and Gaza is not Hamas. Hamas is not only in Gaza, not only in Doha or Beirut, where the leaders are hosted by different governments, but it's an organization that is spreading inside the inside the Palestinian society.
So you think Hamas cannot be defeated? If that's the case, what should Israel be doing that it's not doing at the moment?
It's very difficult to say, because nowadays we are overwhelmed by the destruction of Gaza. So how can you reach an agreement not only with Hamas, but with the Palestinian civil society or the Palestinian political niveau if there is such a destruction, and if we don't see what is the goal of Israel inside Gaza to destroy completely the environment, the infrastructures, Gaza Strip, or to the expulsion of the Palestinians to the Sinai. What is the objective? What is the goal?
At some point, in some way, this fighting will end. And at that point, there will be a Palestinian leadership, a Palestinian entity in Gaza of some kind. Do you believe it will inevitably still be Hamas?
I think that some leaders of Hamas already said that they will support a technocratic government. I mean, they understand that it would be impossible for them to be in Gaza in the same way they were before October 7. So they are trying, not only Hamas, but some other factions, to continue with this never-ending reconciliation process that started in 2005, slightly after the coup that Hamas did in the Gaza Strip. But it's a never-ending story. I don't see a reconciliation nowadays, especially between the PA and Hamas. I see a search for reconciliation in Beijing, in Moscow, where there were the last two meetings among the factions. And I see also the PLO as a sort of empty box or anachronistic box that nowadays starts to develop again.
To grow again. A never-ending story. Paolo, thank you very much indeed for that. Things also still look very fragile in Ukraine. President Zelensky earlier today called the situation around Kharkiv very serious. It's also the day when President Putin was visiting his biggest ally and backer, President Xi, in China. Now, to talk about all of those things, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by the former head of GCHQ, now a visiting professor at the Department of War Studies at King's College London, Sir David Omand. So, David, very good to see you there. Can I start off with what's been going on in Gaza? It does appear that Hamas are much harder to militarily defeat, perhaps, than the Israelis assumed.
Yes, this is the classic situation where you have a terrorist group adopting guerrilla tactics, hiding amongst the population. And to deal with that, as British Army has discovered in campaigns over the years in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Northern Ireland, it is very difficult to deal with an enemy that just pops up, fires a rocket, sets off a roadside bomb, and then disappears again. The key to this, we always told ourselves, and this goes back to Gerald Templer and Malaya, is hearts and minds. But after the pounding that Gaza has had, that's not an obvious route. The other route is tactical intelligence. You can avoid the use of the bludgeon and use the rapier if you know where the bad guys are, and you can act with precision without further mass destruction. I would recommend your audience. There's a Netflix series called Fauda.
It's very good. I've seen it. Yes.
It's based on it's drama, but it's based on truth, which is an Israeli undercover unit attempting to gather tactical intelligence in Gaza before the recent events. What it illustrates, and it's wonderfully made, but what it illustrates is how dangerous that is, how prone it is for those involved to lose their moral compass. This is about as difficult a situation as you can get.
It really is very difficult, and presumably in terms of hearts and minds, it's not a great idea to destroy aid convoys before they get water and food into the people who need that.